Good morning to all of you across the country. I am Dr. Jason Bolton, Vice President of Community Partnerships for the Help Group, and I will be moderating today's webinar titled Strategies for Parents to Support Their Special Needs Child During COVID. We would like to welcome back all of you who had joined us last month for our first webinar, Quality Distance Learning for Students with Special Needs, and thank you for all of the wonderful feedback we received and the important questions that you submitted. If you are unable to attend our last talk, you may find the recorded session at the Help Group's website. Likewise, I would like to welcome any of you who are with us for the first time. We hope that you will leave this session better prepared for these unprecedented times. As many schools and districts across California and the country are preparing for an eventual return to on-campus instruction via a hybrid learning model, the tips and techniques that we are sharing today not only apply to the current distance learning condition, but are equally, and in many cases, even more relevant to the hybrid condition. Now I would like to introduce you to today's talented panel. We are happy to be rejoined by Carrie Borzello, Senior Director of Schools and Head of School of Summit. We also have three new speakers to introduce to you today. Village Glen School parent, Gabriella Bonino, Noya Alperson, Behavior Specialist, and Dr. Megan Beardmore, School Psychologist. Like last time, now that you've heard a little bit about us, we would like to know a little bit about all of you. You should see a short poll pop up on your screen momentarily. Please answer the questions, and I'll give you a minute or two to do so, beginning now. You should see them now. There we go. I see folks are putting their answers into the poll. Thank you. About half of the people have voted. I'll just give a couple more seconds and then I'll just quickly summarize what we're seeing and we'll move along. So more than half of you are parents. That's fantastic. And another 30% are service providers. And we have some teachers, which is great. And then we look down on how challenging COVID has been. The majority of folks are saying fairly challenging. There's good days and some bad. Others are feeling very challenged. Almost a quarter of us are figuring out how to make it okay. And hey, there's 6 people out there who are loving what's going on these days. So we were going to talk a little bit about motivation today, and we're talking about some people are finding about 4 out of 10 are extremely difficult finding a way to motivate students, and put that together with the folks who are saying somewhat, and we have almost everyone saying somewhat to extremely. And again, there are 4 people out there who distance learning is really working well for. Just to know a little bit about the familiarity of behavior strategies to improve compliance and motivation. We have a good mix of people all the way from very familiar to please help me. So thank you for sharing who you are with us. We appreciate that. The poll has stopped. You may have on your own computers, you may have to go up and click the X to X out of your poll so that you can see the screen as we continue. We at the Help Group are honored that you have chosen to spend another hour with us as we share with you what we have learned about supporting students with special needs while they are engaged in distance learning. For those of you joining us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about the Help Group. Among other social and mental health services, the Help Group operates 16 non-public schools in Los Angeles and Orange counties in California, serving students with autism spectrum disorders, learning disabilities, ADHD, developmental delays, and emotional challenges. We contract with more than 80 local education authorities to provide special education and related services to more than 1,400 students. Like many schools in the country, on March 19th, after local and state guidance, we pivoted our instructional practices to a distance learning and remote services delivery model, the details and highlights of which we discussed at length in our first webinar. Between the middle of March and the beginning of June, we received feedback from families, including from 2 surveys we sent out, that informed both the work we are currently doing and our plans for the future that would likely be continuing in a similar model for much longer than the end of the school year. These data and other qualitative feedback clearly indicated what the challenges were that we would need to intentionally address as we further developed our model. Among those issues was the need for parents to have more information and training regarding how to support and motivate their students in virtual learning. As you learned from us before, the Help Group dedicated ourselves to 4 standards: engagement, individualization, communication, and equity in designing and implementing our distance learning and remote services programs. It is with these standards in mind that we bring these ideas to you today. Today, you will hear from 3 school leaders from the Help Group and 1 parent about living examples related to supporting students in distance learning. We will start by hearing from Ms. Borzello as she discusses tips and tools for distance learning for parents. We will then hear from Ms. Bonino describing the parent perception of her son's experience at our Village Glen school. We'll then move on to Ms. Alperson and her discussion about behavior and motivation. And finally, Dr. Beardmore will discuss how executive functioning and anxiety relate to distance learning. As we talk today, you'll have the opportunity to submit questions using the chat button located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Some of you have already been using the chat button to welcome us today. We thank you for that. You can also ask questions there. We will allow for a period of time at the end of the presentation to field some of the more salient questions. So let's get started. Ms. Borzello, we are all now several months into having our children at home learning online. Many parents are experiencing challenges supporting their students in distance learning. What practical advice do you have for parents who are struggling to support their student?
I am Terry Borzello, Senior Director of the Help Group Schools and Summit View Head of School. Parent and family involvement has always been essential to student learning and success. But as students continue to learn from home, family involvement has taken on an entirely new meaning. Many families are assuming a lot more responsibility in their students' schooling, and teachers are seeking ways to best guide and support them. At this point, distance learning is no longer entirely new, but challenges and hurdles still exist. Today, I will share wisdom on how to tackle such challenges, including specific strategies parents may use to best support their child. When it comes to the learning environment, communication and partnering, virtual learning tools, and engagement. As we know, distance learning at home and learning at school is very different, and that's okay. Replicating the habits of a normal classroom is helpful to the success of distance learning. The workspace should be comfortable, located in an area of your home that is quiet and free of distractions, with all the necessary tools and equipment present. Keep other devices and game consoles out of your child's workspace. Minecraft is an unfair competitor to teachers everywhere right now. This can also mean shutting down cell phones, keeping phones in a designated place for the day, and putting away remotes, as we know turning on the television can certainly be a temptation. Our minds associate our beds with sleep, and therefore, sitting or lying in bed isn't the best location for a child to be alert and present to learn, regardless of how comfortable it may be. To help get your children in the proper mindset to learn, as they would if they were on campus, they should dress for the day. There is definitely truth in the saying, dress for success, even virtually. Science actually says, if you want to be smarter, dress better. When we feel good on the outside, we are more likely to feel good on the inside, which boosts our motivation, attitudes, self-confidence, and productivity. Dressing for success can also be fun. Students and parents can experience with different styles and color. Replicating the structure and experience of a bricks and mortar classroom will not only help by adding more routine, but it will also help with the transition back to school on campus. Not being able to be physically present in an actual classroom can mean it's more difficult for teachers to interpret the body language and feelings of their students. It's hard for teachers to really know and gauge what a child may be experiencing outside of what they are seeing on screen. This is certainly an area in which schools and parents need to work in partnership. Insight from parents is critically important to helping ensure success through distance learning. Communication as a whole is more important than ever. By the mere nature of its functionality, distance learning naturally leads to a feeling of disconnectedness and isolation. I encourage parents to stay connected and regularly check in with teachers and administrators. Ask questions and inquire about your child's progress. Email teachers and administrators and request roundtable meetings with your child's teaching team. Through distance learning, many children can benefit from more individualization and tutorial support. It's worth checking to see if this is possible. This is also an opportunity for children to continue building their self-advocacy skills and ask for support. As we know, not physically going to school for extended periods of time can lead to increased feelings of loneliness and anxiety. Please have open dialogue with your child on a consistent and regular basis about their distance learning experience. You'll also want to be cognizant of modeling positivity for your child. If your child overhears or sees any frustration and disappointment from you, it may adversely affect your child's motivation and experience for the time ahead. If a decline in mental health becomes visible, parents should reach out to school administrators for support and to determine who your child can speak with. Ensuring your child's school has a process in place for students to talk about their feelings is important to consider. If a child hasn't had any success with distance learning, and there isn't hope that this will change, parents should reach out to school administrators to see what options exist for more asynchronous learning. Schools should be able to provide an alternate approach, including packets and workbooks to be completed. The presumption of every single student having the necessary technology, time, motivation, and support to participate in distance learning is simply not real. The nation's public schools serve 1.3 million homeless students. They serve almost 30 million children who rely on schools for breakfast and lunch. Understandably, requiring students to have the technological resources and support at home needed for effective distance learning is certainly a challenge. As Dr. Bolton referenced in our last webinar, the help group has deployed many laptops and hotspots to meet the needs of our students, over 475 to date. Rural and low-income communities have less access to broadband internet access than their urban, suburban, and more affluent counterparts. It's important to know that internet providers across the country are making internet access available for free for low-income families with a K-12 student in the household. The bottom line is, for distance learning to be successful, it has to be accessible and equitable for all students. And this is a wonderful resource, and many families are unaware of its existence. As was presented by me in our last webinar, if a student is accustomed to benefiting from using a sensory tool at school, such as a ball chair to sit on, resistance bands, squeeze toys. Inquire to see if it's possible for the school to make this happen at home as well. If not, there are some reasonable options for purchase online too. Such tools go a long way to help minimize anxiety as well as increase focus. For a child who struggles with focusing, when possible, parents should consider keeping them in close proximity and setting up nonverbal or one-word cues to help keep them on track. In addition, sensory breaks should be built into a school schedule. These may vary depending on a child's needs and abilities, as perhaps the weather, but can include walks around the block, watering plants, playing with a pet, and maybe washing the dishes. We wish, right? Breaks are really important, especially for kids with learning and attention issues. So if they aren't already built into your child's school schedule, work with the school to make this happen. Even just time with a fidget toy can be a reset. Such sensory breaks help to minimize screen time as well. If intrinsic motivation is hard to come by, you can incentivize effort and progress in a way that makes sense. Come up with ideas with your child, set benchmarks, and praise the progress along the way. You will hear more about such strategies from Ms. Alperson. Support executive functioning needs by maintaining up-to-date calendars to help with self-pacing, to-dos, and upcoming classwork. A visual schedule for students to follow can be helpful in staying organized. Again, replicate the structure a child would experience if on campus. Regular routines in digital form can help students feel prepared and comfortable. Children should be encouraged to be on time to their virtual classes each and every day. It's also helpful for neurodiverse children to have assignments broken into smaller pieces. Dr. Beardmore will speak more to ways in which executive functioning needs can be addressed during distance learning. To help with student engagement and peer interactions, encourage your child to collaborate virtually with his or her peers in relation to group projects and activities. Sometimes students can be each other's best teachers, and it's another way for students to work on social skills. Relationships certainly require more intentional planning to nurture and maintain through distance learning. Parents, push your child to attend virtual school events and create virtual opportunities outside of school that could be helpful to fostering and building relationships. It's important for children to be able to have outlets as well as fun. Even if another hour on screen does not appear appealing, these are great ways to keep children engaged with classmates and working on social skills. In regard to communication skills, regardless of the level of a child's verbal skills, this is an area of concern for many parents through distance learning. More verbal kids may miss context clues, misinterpret peer interactions, and engage in perseveration. Less verbal kids may need to be constantly nudged to use their supportive equipment. Literally any and every movement of the day can be used to support and improve communication. And communication should be foundational to distance learning for children with special needs. In closing, I hope that I was able to provide you with further insight as well as equip you with some tools and tips for the time ahead. The idea that a student, regardless of disability, is falling behind is a concern I challenge us to spend less time worrying about, especially now in these unprecedented times. A philosophy of less is more, and that learning has never been confined to classroom walls, couldn't be any truer today. In the time ahead, as parents work in partnership with their child's school and juggle the many responsibilities on their plate, it's important to remember to breathe and take care of yourselves. Lean and rely on your child's educational team to ensure an effective plan. Remember to keep your sense of humor and be forgiving of yourself as you navigate this journey. There is no such thing as perfection in this virtual world we are educating in. You at your best will certainly mean your child has a better chance of being at his or her best. At this point, I would like to introduce Gabriella Bonino, whose son, Dominic, is a student at Village Glen, one of the help group's many schools.
Thank you for inviting me to speak today. As you said, our son, Dominic, is a 15-year-old sophomore. He has, he has high-functioning autism with pretty bad anxiety, which became even more fun once he started puberty. And so we always have to keep that in consideration. My husband and I are both teachers. He works full-time, and I have been able to work part-time for many years now. But I don't want you to think that that gives us an unfair advantage, because teaching 30 children that belong to other people has been far easier than working with the 2 children that live in our home. They don't always like to have our help, but we try. Distance learning has been a huge challenge for us, and it's a change. And change is not always good for our kids because they tend to resist change. So one of the ways that we've been working with this is to implement some structure. And of a lot of things I'm going to talk about are things that Ms. Borzello just spoke of, but you can see how we are implementing them for our family. The first thing that I did was I printed out my son's schedule. You can actually see it in the picture there behind him on the wall. And we put it on the wall. It has all of his class schedule, and it has the codes for each class to get into their Zoom meetings in case he forgets. I also printed out the same schedule and put it in my desk area so that I know what he's doing and I don't accidentally walk in on him when he's in the middle of class and embarrass him in front of all of his friends. Our whole family is basically distance learning. My husband and I are teaching, and my son is doing high school, and my daughter is in college. So we don't have a lot of extra space. So my son is working in his bedroom. But one of the first things we did was to clear off his desk of any distractions. And he has a pencil cup there with all of his supplies that he would need, so he doesn't have to start looking for things. We also gave him something as simple as a cushion for his chair, because he's sitting for, 5 hours sometimes at a time with little breaks, but at the computer. He has stress balls, squeeze toys. He uses thinking putty, which is like Theraputty that they use at school, but it's a lot less expensive, and you can buy it in stores and online. And it helps him work on his stress. We ask him every morning to continue his morning routine, just like if he was going to school. So we ask to get up, have breakfast, get dressed, brush his teeth, comb his hair, and make his bed, which he doesn't enjoy, but those are skills we're working on for life as well. Those are his functioning skills that he needs. Also, he doesn't allow to have the phone at all during school, because you can't have the phone when you're in class. So it stays in the other room. And we've encouraged him to continue using his school planner, which he was using. The school gave him a really nice planner last year, but I've heard that they were on back order. So until they come, I just bought a simple planner at the store, and I have him write down his assignments every day so that he doesn't get confused and overwhelmed with the different work that he has for school. We also have homework. He gets a bit of homework since he's in high school. We try to encourage him to complete it as it comes, rather than waiting until like the day before it's due. So we help him work. Well, I ask him first to do as much of it as he can on his own. And then if he gets stuck, I will go over things with him and help him. But I'm trying to work on him being more independent. And the big motivator is there are no video games until homework is complete. Now that, I can tell you, is a huge motivator for teens, any kids really, but teenage boys, big motivator to get that homework done. So we also are working with him to be advocating for himself. So if he has questions or things that he can't figure out, When he was younger, I would email his teachers, but now I'm asking him to email his teachers directly. And so he's working on his communication, his advocating, and his emailing skills, which is something he will use for a very long time. And I think it makes him feel proud to advocate for himself. Also this year, they've implemented office hours at the end of his day, which we really like because you can go to your teachers and ask for help. And I've noticed that the teachers and the administrators, whenever we've emailed them for anything, are pretty quick to respond and always ready to help with any questions or concerns that we've had. The school has provided a huge amount of support for us ever since we've been there. And I'm not sure, but I'll keep going. The school has provided a huge amount of support for us. We've had social skills, counseling and speech. That was before distance learning, and they have continued those practices, which is nice to keep consistency for him and just help him work on skills that he needs. Also, his homeroom teacher, oh, there she is, actually. That was at the winter formal last year. He looks so tall. She's also kind of small, so I guess that evens out. Keeps us informed on everything that's going on at school and anything important that we need to know, which is another great communication that we appreciate. Dominic started at the help group during the summer of 8th grade, so this will be his second actual school year. During middle school, he was in a variety of settings, both public and non-public. And I can tell you that we've seen the good, the bad, and the really bad. So I feel very confident that the help group has been the perfect place for him and has helped provide him with a great balance of challenging him academically, as well as providing the support that he needs. And the one thing, though, that has been a struggle that is the most difficult is that he misses his friends. He has made an amazing group of friends since he's been there. And in the beginning, he said to me, Mom, I have these friends and they get me. And it was hard for me not to cry because it's not easy for our kids to make friends sometimes. And prior to the big change that we've been experiencing, the friends and all of our families, we get together every once in a while and have like potlucks and get together for the boys to socialize. And it was really nice. Well, now one of the families has taken it upon themselves to organize Zoom meetings, and the boys have Zoom meetings about every other Sunday. And sometimes they watch a movie, sometimes they play video games, sometimes they just sit around and talk about memes and weird videos that they found on the internet and laugh their heads off. And it's been great for him to feel connected to his friends. And now the parents, we have started having our own Zoom meetings so we can talk because, how's it going? How are you holding up? Having a child with special needs can be very challenging sometimes, and it's nice to have people to support you and who understand what it feels like. So every day when I would take Dominic to school and he would get out of the car, I would always say to him, and we've continued this at home, every day I would say with him, "May the force be with you." And he would look at me and say, "And with you." So that was our way of starting the day on a positive note. And if he was having especially nervous day, because maybe he had a test or something going on, I would say, you don't have to be a Jedi every day. You just have to try your best. And so we've had some good days with distance learning. We've had some pretty rough days, but every day is a new day, I remind him, and we just keep trying our best. And as a parent, I can tell you, this is challenging, but this too shall pass. And I'll leave you with our family motto, "May the force be with you."
Thank you so much, Ms. Bonino. It's always heartwarming to hear our family's personal stories. I love that you've been able to have that social time for Dominic, and that the parents have also been a social support to each other. We're lucky to benefit from your knowledge today as both a teacher and a Village Glen parent, and we're lucky to have you as our partner. We wish Dominic nothing but success in his future education and his Jedi training. Before we continue, just because we've had a couple of folks ask in the chat, yes, we are recording this session. We will send out the link to everyone who registered for the webinar. And in the chat, you will also see the web address where you can access it once we're able to put it up. You'll also find last month's webinar on there as well. Okay, Ms. Alperson. It seems that one of the issues that parents talk about in distance learning is maintaining their students' motivation to learn while they are learning from home. Can you tell us a little bit about an approach you would suggest as parents confront challenging behaviors and motivation concerns?
Hi, yes, thank you, Dr. Bolton, and hello, everyone. My name is Noya Alperson, and today I'm going to be sharing with you ways in which we can address those behavioral concerns you may be experiencing and how we can work on getting our kiddos motivated to participate in distance learning. Today, I hope to be able to address some of these questions and provide some solutions to help make things at home a bit smoother. We will be looking at identifying why our child may be behaving in certain ways. We're going to be looking at ways in which we can implement things before behaviors occur. And we're also going to be looking at how we can de-escalate your child if behaviors do occur. Before we start, I want you to keep in mind this one thing. In order to help a child engage in a desired behavior, we must change our behavior first. Many of you may have heard of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, before. For those of you who have not, ABA is a scientific approach to understanding behavior. ABA is built on universal principles that have been tested and tried time and time again before becoming one of our coined ABA pillars. Today we will be going over some of those basic principles and how you can implement them in your own home on a daily basis. If you have ever thought, why is my child behaving this way? You are not alone. Sorry about that. I'm so sorry. So some of you guys may be asking why your child is behaving this way. We call that the functions. So if you look here, we have 4 different functions of behavior. And your child may be behaving in these ways for these 4 different reasons that I like to call the 4 A's. We have avoidance or escape, access to tangible, attention, or automatic. So when your child is engaging in certain behaviors at home, you may have to stop and think, why is my child behaving this way? Is he trying to get out of distance learning? Is he trying to access something else like a computer or a video game to do something fun? Is he doing it to try to get my attention, or is it something automatic? So when we're looking at these 4 things, we need to look at how we're responding to our child and why they're behaving this way. And based on how we respond, that's how we can assess the function. Am I letting my kid get out of distance learning and avoid doing that every time he cries? Am I giving him attention every time he engages in these behaviors? Or am I giving him something that he wants? So let's talk about John. That's a kiddo that I've been working with at the help group, and we'll call him John. That's not his name. And so John's mom reached out to me before distance learning and said, I don't know how I'm going to be doing this. How am I going to be engaging in distance learning when at the end of last year, John was having such a hard time? So we said, the first thing that you need to look at is, what are these behaviors? Why is he engaging in these behaviors, and what do they look like? She was telling me that John was crying, getting upset, sometimes even walking away from the computer. And so when I asked her, when these behaviors happen, how are you responding? What are you doing as engage in these behaviors? And her response was, I'm letting him get out of it. I offer him a break, and I'm letting him walk away from the computer. So we were able to identify that John was actually engaging in those avoidance behaviors. And so With that being said, we were able to start assessing what we can do and what our action plan might be. And so, why is my child behaving this way? This is where we move on to thinking about our action plan. It's the way in which we're responding to our child, which has them react in different ways. So here you look at the word reinforcement. It's the way in which we respond to those behaviors. Is the child getting what they want? Reinforcement often looks as something positive. We've heard the term reinforcement before, and often we think of that as a reinforcement system. However, there's also ways to reinforce negative or challenging behaviors. When a child is engaging in crying or is upset, then we let them get out of that task, we are often reinforcing that behavior. And likely our child will learn to do it again. In John's case, that's what happened. John learned that over time, he was able to escape by crying and getting upset. And so we needed to figure out what we needed to do to get through this. And if you've ever thought, why is my child behaving this way? You're definitely not alone. Sometimes it can be difficult to understand why a child is engaging in certain behaviors because it may not make much sense to us. However, this is the first step that you should consider before you come up with your action plan and addressing those behaviors. If mom tries to change her behavior, however, then she saw a ton of behavior spike. She saw that when she finally decided to put her foot down, she just ended up getting John really extra upset, and that was something that she didn't want to do, so she continued to reinforce that behavior. So where do we start? How do we undo this pattern of behavior? Now that we identified why, also known as the function, we're ready to move into our intervention, our action plan. Antecedent strategies are tools you can implement before a behavior occurs. When your child engages in similar behaviors during similar circumstances, you are better able to predict what your child might do. And that's when you can use your antecedent tools. Mom expressed that John was overwhelmed by the workload. After hearing concerns, we decided to implement something called demand fading, which is a strategy in which we start with minimal requirements and work up from there. We cut John a deal. We told them that although the school day runs from 9 to 3, we were only requiring him to sign in for the first 15 minutes to check in. Although that felt like John's abilities, we needed to start getting John to engage in some compliance. After a few days of John agreeing to do that, we raised the expectation a bit and embedded some choices. The next day, we told John that he can pick either language arts or math to participate in moving forward. Eventually, we started requiring one assignment and so on. As John was able to build his confidence and complete his work in smaller parts, we were able to see a domino effect where more and more assignments were able to get completed. While his confidence and tolerance grew, we slowly introduced more and more. We embedded choices, so John had the opportunity to have more control over what he wanted to complete first. Antecedent strategies are an effective approach you can implement before any problem behavior occurs. Some other antecedent strategies you see here include a token economy, where you set up a point system to track positive and desired behaviors and offer a reward once those things are completed. Additionally, functional communication training is an effective antecedent that teaches our students to use communication to get their wants and needs met. Lastly, break schedules can be an effective tool to alleviate any potential challenging behaviors from occurring. Alongside the classroom schedule, you can set up breaks for your child to look forward to. The break can be contingent on your child engaging in those desired behaviors. For example, telling your child that he or she participates in distance learning for a certain amount of minutes, they'll be able to earn a 5-minute break doing a preferred activity. There are dozens of antecedent strategies that are extremely effective that you can implement in your own home. Although antecedent strategies are a very effective tool, sometimes they may just not work. It may be one of those days where your child may just not want to do it. Behaviors may come back again out of nowhere, and it can feel super overwhelming. As Ms. Borzello touched on, if this occurs, I want you to remember this. Do not panic. If your child sees that you're calm and that you're keeping cool and relaxed, they're likely to model your behavior. So instead, when John is crying and telling you he does not want to sign into class, remember, The way you're going to respond to that will determine how John reacts in the future. I want you to focus on avoiding reinforcing the crying behavior and instead focus on reinforcing the fact that John is using his words, and say things like, John, thank you so much for letting me know that you're upset and that you're having a tough time. I appreciate you using your words. I also want you to think of this. It is okay to provide comfort, but please remain firm. If your child can sense you're about to cave, behaviors may spike. If your child learns that you mean business, they will learn to stop trying, as they will see it is no longer effective. Mom tries to reinforce everything John does right. Good job for sitting at your desk next to your computer, or you got dressed this morning and brushed your teeth. Those are things that help you get your day started on the right track. Lastly, try to catch the moment where your child takes a breath and is calm, even if it's just for 1 second in the middle of a meltdown. Tell them how proud you are that they are starting to calm down. Even if classes started and you missed an opportunity because the behavior lasted a long time, don't give up for the day. Show your child that you are going to do something that day, whether it's joining the class from Zoom, completing an assignment, or checking in with your teacher during office hours. Hold your kiddos accountable. Today, we were able to learn a little bit about John's journey. He was trapped in the cycle of refusal that was being reinforced by the people around him. John learned that if he started to cry or he walked away, he would get exactly what he wanted, escape or avoidance from joining distance learning. Mom decided to take some control in order to help set up John for success. Did it happen overnight? No. Did he suddenly love distance learning? Also no. But he did get there gradually. First, Mom identified the function, or why John was engaging in these challenging behaviors. She looked at her own behavior and said, wow, every time John gets upset, I'm letting him escape or get out of distance learning. Am I part of the problem? Next, we came up with some antecedent strategies to implement before any problem behaviors occurred. Lastly, we talked about things Mom can do if John does engage in challenging behaviors. Neither Mom nor John got discouraged along the way, because we figured out what worked for both of them. We started off slow and steady with minimal expectations to try and build that compliance. We implemented a structured day. We set out clear expectations and we followed through on those expectations. Remember, in order to help a child engage in a desired behavior, we must change our own behavior first. We must look at how we respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alperson. It's always nice to have your toolbox filled with proven interventions. And thank you for sharing your story of your work with John with us today. Dr. Beardmore, other issues that we are hearing a lot about involve inattention or distractions at home, as well as anxiety affecting students at home. Please share with us a bit about how anxiety and inattention affect students in distance learning, and more importantly, what we can do about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Bolton. I'm Dr. Megan Beardmore, and I'm a school psychologist involved in many of our help group schools. So interweaving with what we've learned from Ms. Alperson about our students' behaviors, an important aspect to keep in mind is that if our children don't know how to organize themselves or are feeling dysregulated, that will also prevent them from being successful with virtual learning. These behaviors are a reflection of their executive functioning and emotional control. So today I'm going to be providing tips on managing those aspects. So first, let's define what executive functions are. And as you can see on this slide, there's a lot going on, but essentially it's a set of cognitive skills that are necessary to achieve a goal. However, for the purposes of this presentation, I'm talking about the things highlighted in blue, which are related to distance learning, being time management and prioritization, as well as structure and organization. So let's dive right into the 3 principles on how to improve your child's executive functioning. First and foremost, we want to make changes to the child's environment. Again, I'm drawing on Mrs. Borzello, Mrs. Bonino, Ms. Alperson. We're all saying the same thing, just a little differently, but the emphasis is on being about the antecedent as incredibly important. And it's especially important when we think about the pros and cons from going to school in our homes. So wherever you've determined as the space for your child to participate in distance learning, consider what this space was to them prior to COVID. Was it a relaxing and safe place? Was it an open area with lots of commotion? Ultimately, you need to find out how can you set up that space where they can best participate. Second point here is use your child's innate drive for mastery and control instead of fighting it. So any parent knows that kids work very hard to control their own lives, and there are ways that you can support your child's agenda while still remaining in charge. The first piece here is about creating those routines and structures while building in choices. That's what I'm adding here, is about that autonomy. So we want them to help you structure their day as much as possible. So for example, asking them when they want their movement breaks, if they're not already embedded in their day or if they need more, what they want their background to look like, those sorts of things. And then secondly, on this point, when it comes to teaching them how to prioritize doing homework and school tasks, we want to give them choice and support their autonomy here as well. So in my virtual groups, I always try to give kids choices to decide what we do first. Some kids prefer the easy stuff because it boosts them up and they feel motivated and ready to go, whereas we have other kids who can't stop perseverating about doing the hard stuff, and so they have to do that first. So the point is that while you have your own preferences as a parent or a care provider, your child will have their own. So especially for older students, we want to give them as much space as possible to try it out and decide from their own experience of what works best. We heard from Mrs. Bonino about her son and, procrastinating homework on Thursday night just didn't work for them, but her child was able to figure that out on his own. And then the third point here is providing the just enough amount of support. So often parents and service providers give too much support or not enough. One leading to a lack of independence, the other leading to being over-reliant on parents. So you want to determine how far the child can get on their own and then intervene. Ultimately, the goal is for the child to be as independent as possible, whatever that means for your child and family, and to keep those supports and supervision in place until your child succeeds, and then fade those out gradually. All right, so you saw that emotional control was an aspect of executive functioning, so now we'll shift gears to talk specifically about anxiety. So the first slide here is feeling thermometers. So I'm a big proponent of using visuals for our kids for a number of reasons, but especially with feelings like anger and anxiety. Not only does this tell us how they're feeling, but it increases your child's sense of awareness of how they're feeling. I very often hear from parents and children alike that they're either at a 1 or a 10. So it helps them kind of figure out where's that middle ground and to figure out what's really escalating them to get at an 8 or a 9. And then once your child is able to rate their feelings on a thermometer scale, the next step will be to tie that into coping skills. So how about we start with this strategy? Calm down! Yeah, feeling a little triggered? Yeah, nobody wants to be told to calm down. Typically, it makes it just a little bit worse. So it's also problematic because when we tell children to calm down, it doesn't tell them how or what to do instead. So we want to give them options to choose from. And this slide here has 4 little boxes where I feel like it's important to differentiate the different types of coping skills because they're useful at different times. So the first one here is the self-soothing. So we've had all of our panelists so far speaking about this, but it's essentially just comforting yourself through the 5 senses, using fidgets, putty, things like that have been mentioned so far. The second is distraction. This has been my personal stay-at-home favorite for the past 6 months. Binging TV, probably eating too many sweets. But what this does is it just takes your mind off the problem for a while. And while it doesn't help you figure out the problem, distraction does have a time and place. So the third one here is pretty straightforward. Emotional awareness is just being able to identify and express your feelings. So back in the office, I have a big feelings chart for kids to come in and they point out how they're feeling. And that's how we start off our sessions. But now virtual learning, I do that the very same way, where they enter into my Zoom meeting room and they pick out their emotions. So just being able to say, I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling tired today takes a load off of that emotion, if that makes sense. The fourth one here is mindfulness. So I'm talking about grounding yourself in the present moment. And when I talk about mindfulness, I'm usually presenting breathing exercises. And that's when kids and parents, service providers are all groaning at me, telling me it doesn't work. So the key here is to give your children something to focus on while doing the breath work. So for example, when we do body scans, we're kind of checking into different areas of our body to see if there's any tension. So when we start with our head, they can tap their brains and then move down to the jaw and start tapping their jaw, seeing if there's any tension. But it just gives them sort of a centering point while they go through the body scan. The other technique is to do some tapping across the midline as you move through that body scan, because what that's doing when we cross the midline is that it sends a signal to both sides of the brain to physically re-regulate the body. The last one here is using visuals when we do breath work. So if you just Google and YouTube visual breath work or visual breathing exercise, you can find a lot of these, but one of my favorites is following along a box. There's like a little visual where you breathe in, hold the breath, breathe out, hold the breath, and you just can follow along. All right, so then one of my favorite activities during virtual summer camp this year was building coping toolboxes or menu boards. So again, what works for some of our kids won't work for others. The point being here is to brainstorm with your child what works for them. So we made physical toolboxes where we just used an old shoebox and had them put their favorite stuff in, or you can use a menu where they can draw or print off things from the internet. The idea here is that it's a visual for them to use, so as adults, we're not telling them what to do. And lastly here, make sure to connect the tools to that thermometer rating. Some are more appropriate for lower levels, some are more appropriate for being at an 8 or 9. Lastly, moving really quickly, I have some last resources. So this first book on the left is one of my favorite for parents, Smart But Scattered, has tangible strategies for executive functioning. There's also a teen edition to that because we know executive functioning skills evolve on a developmental, nature. Then on the right, I have my favorite calming apps. So Headspace, if you have a child who has a therapist in the school setting, they can use what's called an NPI number to get full access to that app for free. Calm is great for kids who have difficulties winding down at night. And then 3, everybody loves a free all access app. So that is Smiling Mind. And so with that, I hope you're able to use these strategies to help your child get organized for distance learning and ways to stay calm when things get hard.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beardmore. We have, I'll have so you certainly got my attention in trying to calm us down, but we've now recovered, and I definitely know that we feel more prepared to address these issues unique to distance learning. We have a brief amount of time to answer some of the questions that you have submitted to us during the webinar. We certainly will not be able to get to all of them, but I want to reassure you, you may have seen this if you attended our first webinar, that we will send out answers to some of the common questions that we saw in the chat to the people who registered for this as soon as we have the recording ready to send to you all. I'm gonna go to one question and we'll see if we can get through it and maybe have one more. Ms. Alperson, I'm actually gonna start with you. Make sure you unmute yourself. I know you weren't prepared to talk yet. Here's the question. I feel like I have to sit directly next to my daughter, or else I feel like she won't pay attention, or she'll access websites that aren't related to school, or she just won't get any work done. I just can't trust that she will participate or that she will behave appropriately without me being right there. How can I start decreasing my time at her hip and start trusting her more?
Good question, Dr. Bolton. Thank you. So I'm sure many of you have been facing this issue on a daily basis. Our students are often becoming prompt dependent, which in other words essentially means that our students have learned to rely on our prompts and supports in order to get anything done. They require us to sit right there to remind them, all right, check in, turn this in, did you do this? Even just simply to stay seated. They've become very prompt dependent on us at this time. So teaching our kiddos to be more independent is probably the most important skill I think we can instill at this point. So an effective strategy to decrease that dependency and start increasing more of that independent skill building is fading. So in ABA, we have a term, it's called fading, and that's where you kind of just like it sounds, you slowly fade yourself out rather than just cutting out cold turkey. So, starting with having yourself present, and then slowly as, they build a little bit more independence, and very gradually, you slowly fade yourself out, whether you stand up and say, all right, I'm going to go do something for 2 minutes and I'm going to come back and check on you. You should be doing this when I return, and really only leaving for about a minute or two, and then slowly working your way, from there, and making sure we're reinforcing our students. I'm so proud of you. When I came back, you were doing exactly what I asked you to do. Something else you can try is priming your child before you walk away. I'm going to be walking away in a couple of minutes. These are the things that I expect you to do when I get back, and making sure we're reinforcing if they do it and redirecting them if they aren't. Hope that was helpful.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I know there are many more questions. And like I said, we will get to them in writing to you guys very soon. Before we go, one of the things I did want to mention earlier, Ms. Borzello and Ms. Bonino both talked about experiences. I think more of our panelists did too. Just want to remind everyone that the help group has a program called Kids Like Me that offers weekly structured social skills groups, as well as a worry warriors group to develop the calming toolbox that Dr. Beardmore was talking about earlier. Kids Like Me also offers after-school enrichment classes designed for children with autism spectrum disorder and other social learning challenges. The classes are currently virtual, open to students locally and across the country, and offer exciting opportunities for young people to engage, experience, and explore in a safe and welcoming environment. New classes will start in October and are highlighted on our website. We have come to the end of our time today. I want to thank Carrie Borzello, Gabriella Bonino, Noya Alperson, and Megan Beardmore for sharing your expertise with us this morning. This presentation has been recorded, and we'll let you know when it's available to view and share with your colleagues and friends. If there are questions that we were not able to get today, we will share those with you in a follow-up email as well. Please watch for the Help Group's annual summit, a cutting-edge conference featuring leading experts across the country regarding advances and best practices in ADHD, learning disabilities, and autism spectrum disorder, which will be held virtually this year on October 16th and 17th. And be sure to look out for our next webinar scheduled for November 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. In addition to our outreach to you, you can find more information regarding the next webinar and the summit on the Help Group's website. These certainly are challenging times, and we all look forward to the day when all students are back learning on their school campuses. In the meantime, this is a time to focus on giving every student a quality distance learning education. At the Help Group, we endeavor to provide that to our students and to impart what we have learned to parents, other schools, and other communities. If you would like to learn more about our schools and programs, including our virtual school programs for students with special needs within or outside the LA area, you may go to our website at www.thehelpgroup.org, email our admissions department at admissions@thehelpgroup.org, or even just give us a call at 877-943-5747. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.